this continuous, pathetic showmanship of Fikile, ek doen absoluut vere, Mbalula, who now comes up on Friday and makes a statement that we don't need the DA. And if they don't want to come with ANC policy, we have other people. When you pull a gun, fire. This perpetual threat of, if we don't get what we want, we are going to walk out. This is becoming pathetic. Helen Zille says, verbatim, at one stage, that the BELA Bill is a non-negotiable. Well,
a red line.
It's a red line. Well, they've passed it now. Now, what are you going to do? Move the red line? I will say that I know John. I have worked with John, as you know, at the Multi-Party Charter. I have a great affinity to him as a human being.
But what was he thinking, trying to blackmail President Cyril Ramaphosa into not signing the BELA Bill by threatening to walk out of a GNU?
Well, I think let's talk about that. I think there are two things I'd like to talk about that happened this week. This story about you and me picking a fight at school, and then at first break, I tell you, get me at the tennis court. Now, we get to the tennis court, but by then you and I have kind of calmed down. But your friends and my friends want us to murder each other. Now, we are looking at each other, kind of saying, no, we are okay. But because of pressure, we now have to slap each other. So now this is the same story that's happening in the GNU, and it's not going to bode well for us who are, can I call it, in the middle, that want to have peace, that want to just get on with it. So here's a classic. As soon as the DA and its partners, because now remember, the DA can no longer say it's them. They cannot say the ANC government. They are the government. Now, there are two things that happen which I find on the GNU absolutely pathetic. Number one, every time you're not going to get your way, you're going to threaten to walk out. Now, I was told by a very astute soldier one day, when you pull a gun, fire. You never threaten a person with a gun. You either tell the person you are going to shoot him if he doesn't stop, and then shoot him. When you take your gun out, do it. So this perpetual threat of, if we don't get what we want, we are going to walk out. This is becoming pathetic. So now we've got the BELA Bill, which we will address today, NHI coming up. I hope the understanding of land without compensation, all those things which the pre-part GNU parties brought to the table to say that we're going to save South Africa. We are going to remove the ANC. We will stand. Helen Zille says, verbatim, at one stage, that the BELA Bill is a non-negotiable. Well,
a red line.
It's a red line. Well, they've passed it now. Now, what are you going to do? Move the red line. And as if here thou were trapped. Move the line. So number one, the GNU is based on a government of national unity. They put so much pressure on the DA, and then they get told, but if you sign it, we might take other options. What other options? So they didn't. They just let it get signed. The so-called Minister of Basic Education, the DA minister, decides that to absolutely protest against the signing. She's not at the signing. So one, the GNU must get its act together, that it does not continue spilling to the public, that ons gaan jou moer as jy dit doen, and then you don't. Number two, this continuous pathetic showmanship of Fikile, ek doen absoluut vere, Mbalula, who now comes up on Friday and makes a statement that we don't need the DA. And if they don't want to come with ANC policy, we have other people. Did you hear? We have other people that will join us. Now, that is like tantamounting a man coming home every day and your wife tells you that if you don't want to do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to divorce you. And by the way, I have someone better than you. Wow. So, dit is 'n klomp gemors. This is utter rubbish. This is not being adult. This is not being pro-citizen. This is actually ANC, DA, PA, IFP, and the other gentleman, senior that joined. And well, Action SA is standing there and still throwing the proverbial stone. But all the parties, the Freedom Front, so DA, Freedom Front, IFP, that have actually joined the GNU, they are government, Chris. Now, are we, as the people who are now settling into the OROS that we were given, that this must happen, it's better to be us than the MK and EF. It is better to go this route, so we have now accepted it. But really, to have both parties continually sit there and attack each other and threatening to dissolve the GNU does not bode well for us. And I hope that they settle. I hope that they now become the people that we appointed to have, and that is to lead, not to actually sit there and pick high school fights.
Yeah, you heard it for yourself, guys. Now the beer is blazing hot on this issue of the BELA Bill. And the fact that, a lot of the GNU members are beginning to use threats to kind of like blackmail the government to either trying to appease one faction or deny the other faction. And we saw that, John Steenhuisen, before the signing of the bill, actually, I think he posed some threats to the GNU, but at the end of the day, didn't materialize. I think he threatened that the DA would likely probably leave the GNU or something. I think if you could hear from Neo de Beer's speech, but at the end of the day, the DA is still there. And also, Neo de Beer is also really angry with Fikile Mbalula also as well, threatening, that, that whoever wants to leave the GNU should leave, that, they have options. And he really thinks that that's really unwelcoming in that regard, because at the end of the day, during the May 29 election, it was a really clear message from South Africans that, they're really tired of the leadership of the ANC. They do not want the ANC to rule alone. And so in a bid to kind of like prop up the image of the ANC, the DA and all these other smaller parties had to come up, join the ANC, although the ANC still remains the majority. But according to Neo de Beer, there still has to be some form of respect or, sort of like recognition of the fact that these guys now make up the party are not just appendages, but they are kind of like, they give legitimacy to the government. But it seems that from Fikile's perspective, he actually feels that there are other options outside, and these options obviously would likely be the EFF, the MK party. And so as a result of that, he's using that perspective to kind of like silence any threat from the present GNU parties at the moment, you see. And Neo de Beer is not really taking that lightly. I found an article on IOL anyway that actually speaks about this and helps us to really understand, the inner dynamics with what's going on in the GNU at the moment. This is only the first. This is May, June, July, August, September. We're only 4 months in. We still have 5 years to go, and I think at this point we shouldn't really be seeing this kind of threats and all that. The GNU should be moving kind of like in a united way. After all, it's called the Government of National Unity, but these threats actually threaten the unity of the government in that regard, and I really don't think that will fare well for South Africa. But anyway, Fikile Mbalula, this title here says, "Do not threaten us. We have options." Mbalula says the government would collapse if other parties, the government won't collapse if other parties leave the GNU. So according to Fikile Mbalula, the Government of National Unity, this present government, led by the ANC, but also with all these other parties, won't collapse if any of the members at the moment, the FF Plus, the DA, the PA, the IFP, the UDM, the ACDP, the party that make up the Government of National Unity. According to Fikile, he's so confident that whichever party leaves the GNU at the moment, the GNU will not collapse. The GNU will still stand, and that's kind of like authoritativeness. Authoritative tone that's actually making Neo de Beer really sound. You could hear how mad, how angry he really is with that perspective from the ANC. And so the article says that Secretary General of the ANC, Fikile Mbalula, has actually welcomed the signing of the contentious Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, BELA Bill, into law, which on Friday we all saw that. And also this was done despite the opposition to the enactment of the legislation. Okay. So it says that President Ramaphosa actually signed a controversial bill into law at the Union Building on Friday, a move which has upset other parties in the government of national unity, particularly the Democratic Alliance, and they have actually threatened to go to court. Although I'm still yet to hear from Helen Zille anyway. I'm really eager to hear her reaction to the signing of BELA Bill and her next course of action as what probably might be Secretary General of the Democratic Alliance as well. But anyway, the article goes on to say that in signing the BELA Bill, President Ramaphosa announced that he has resolved to delay the implementation of certain clauses of the bill which deal with schools, admission, and language for 3 months while consultation happens. So you see, this point here is actually one of those points that actually makes Neo the Bear really mad, because he's actually likening this to shooting a deer, and actually before eating the deer, asking if anybody has a speech to talk about before eating. To him, it's kind of like counterintuitive to actually sign in a law and then kind of like ask to delay on the implementations of some clauses of that law, but the law has already been signed. But anyway, that's story for another day. But anyway, the report then goes on to say that according to President Ramaphosa now speaking, he says in the last few days, the parties to the government of national unity have expressed their wish to further engage each other on sections of the bill that deal with issues of admission, language in the spirit of cooperation, and meaningful engagement. Okay, so members of the GNU want to kind of like meet together and still discuss the issues of admission and language, in the spirit of cooperation and meaningful engagement. So he's opening that opportunity to engage, although the bill has been signed. All right, so Ramaphosa still speaking. He says, I have decided to delay the implementation date for clauses 4 and 5 of the bill by 3 months. All right, so that's where the bill is at the moment. This will actually give the parties time to deliberate on these issues and make proposals on how their different views may be accommodated. Should the parties not be able to agree on an approach, then we will proceed with the implementation of this part of the bill. So you see, there's still kind of like that top-down approach that Neo the Bear actually feels like it's authoritative from his perspective, but I think from the perspective of the ANC, they feel that they have to proceed with policy. Policy has to just keep on going on. But anyway, the report then goes on to say that in reactions to these developments, Fikile Mbalula actually said that this was not a desperate attempt to save the government of national unity. According to him now, he says, it is not so much about relationships more than being decent and maintaining the principle of cooperation among parties in terms of what needs to happen to people who serve in the same government. Allow them space to basically ventilate, because they too have got constituencies. They were elected on a ticket. So this is Mbalula now speaking to a broadcaster on Newsroom Africa. He's still saying, in this particular instance, we are the largest party. That is why we caution everybody to say, don't threaten. We too are not married to the GNU. We have got other options. So threats don't work. The decent way to do things is to talk. And if we can't find each other, we have got to move ahead. So you see, this is the perspective from Fikile Mbalula. He's actually coming from the perspective that the ANC is still the majority. And if anybody wants to leave, that they're not scared, because they have options. There are options to always fill in that any gap that anybody who would leave, would cause in the GNU. And that's a really strategic move, because right now, the DA is in a really tight spot, because if the DA leaves at this moment, then what then becomes of the party? Because now South Africa has moved from opposition politics to government of national unity kind of politics. And so the DA will have its feet planted in thin air. But if the DA continues to then stay, it would mean that it would acquiesce to probably the authority of the ANC, which of course, since it's the majority anyway, it naturally yields. But it appears that Fikile Mbalula is having more of this kind of like tone which Neo the Bear doesn't think is comfortable, because he feels that they are kind of like equal mates in the government of national unity, and some form of respect should actually lead the way. So Fikile still speaking. He says, if you decide to move away and drop from the GNU, it is not a train smash. Government will not collapse. Stability is guaranteed in this GNU going forward, and we are determined to do that. So we are actually extending a hand of goodwill to everybody to ensure that the spirit of cooperation prevails. So that's from Fikile Mbalula. But anyway, the report then goes on to say that the former Minister of Police actually said that the ANC could have arrogantly gone ahead and implemented the bill in its entirety without taking into consideration the views of other parties. Fikile added that there is no challenge with the BELA Bill, but it is merely a question of linguistics in terms of the rights of school governing bodies to determine what happens in schools. Now, there's this other really interesting person, the EFF national spokesperson, Leanne Mattis. She actually said that South Africa needs the BELA Bill. So you see, exactly what I observed when I was watching the signing of the BELA Bill. On the comments, there were some people who were celebrating, and another faction were actually saying that, they've been betrayed and all that. So it appears that, the BELA Bill is actually a power struggle. You see, it's kind of like a power struggle between those who think that they've been marginalized by the present policies in education and those who think that the BELA Bill would probably cause more marginalization of another group of people. So it's really a power struggle with this BELA Bill. So the EFF spokesperson now, Leanne Mattis, she's actually speaking. She says that the BELA Bill introduces a suite of amendments to address systematic inequalities of basic education in South Africa. The DA is vehemently opposed to the bill because its inherent hatred of the African child. So this is actually now the perspective of the EFF by the spokesperson Leanne Mattis. She's actually continuing. She also says, we particularly support the fact that heads of departments will now be given the final authority to determine the admission and language policies at schools, and the school governing bodies are currently solely responsible for this, and this has enabled them to use this power to exclude African learners and entrench racism in these schools. Now, this power has been used as a tool in the hands of white supremacists to isolate African languages and exclude African children from attending public schools that were formerly exclusively white, says Leanne Mattis. So, in conclusion, it actually says that in addition, the Good Party, led by Minister Patricia de Lille, has also thrown in her weight behind the BELA Bill. So, Patricia de Lille of Good Party actually supports the BELA Bill. So, at the end of the day, my conclusion on what I'm reading about this whole BELA Bill, and it appears that there are some constituencies that it angers and some constituencies that it favors. And so, it's really difficult. And this kind of like still highlights the whole sensitivity of the populace of South Africa. You see, it's really sensitive, passing bills. I speak about how sensitive it is to be a policeman, how sensitive it is to be a lawyer, how sensitive it is to be a judge, because you are dealing with a really sensitive populace, really multiculturally sensitive, multi-ethnically sensitive. And so this is actually why the BELA Bill now is kind of like throwing a lot of punches in the air. Some people are angry, some people are happy, and at the end of the day, who knows, how divided the BELA Bill might continuously divide the country. But at the end of the day, while something that the BELA Bill is a route to equality, something that it's actually a kind of like retrenchment, or kind of like stealing their power away. Like Neil Debe, for example, speaks about how parents will not be able to decide the kind of policies they would like their children, or schools under environment they would like their children to learn. But one other faction thinks that the bill is necessary because then it actually helps disenfranchise African children to kind of like get over the whole racist or white supremacist tendencies in many white schools or something like that. So it's really tricky where this BELA Bill lies. And, Ramaphosa now has 3 months to consider these 3 clauses that seem to be really problematic to the DA and other parties. And then after that, we'll see really what happens. But I know that it's a sensitive one. It's one that actually signifies and identifies, highlights the power struggles, silent power struggles that lies in South Africa, especially racial power struggles, and hopefully it ends up in a really positive light. But anyway, I don't know, what do you guys think about this Neil Debe speech here and the analysis? Share your thoughts. Let's all learn together in the comments.